Interfaces are a difficult concept to get your head around when you're just starting off with object-oriented programming. In this video, I'm going to share such examples with you that the concept of interfaces is going to get finely ingrained in your brains forever. Let's start by looking at the definition of interfaces on our screen. So an interface can be considered as a binding contract between two or more components of an application. It is easier to understand interfaces when you talk about interfaces in context of hardware, because you're using interfaces with any hardware in your day-to-day life. So what you see on your screen is an example of your laptop, which has a USB interface. And using the USB interface, you can connect any device to that laptop, which is compliant with a USB interface. So for example, if your phone supports a USB interface, you can connect your phone. Same goes for your mouse as well as for your keyboard. These devices have a binding contract, which means these devices have to be USB devices in order to connect to your laptop. But once these devices are connected to your laptop using the USB interface, you don't care. They work automatically. You as a device owner don't care about how internally these devices are working with your laptop. All you're worried about is that you need to have this kind of an interface, which is USB interface, that is compliant with your laptop, and you're sure that your device would work. Similarly, this can be applied in context of applications as well. So if you look at this particular screen, there can be interfaces in application. For example, a user interface. And this user interface is responsible for connecting or interacting with the rest of the application. As long as your user, which can be an admin user or a customer or a guest user, adheres to this binding contract that is the user interface, you are sure that this particular user is compliant with the rest of the application as well. These users can be different from each other, can have different functionality. So admin can have the functionality of managing other users, while customer and guest users might not have that functionality. But as long as these users all comply with the user interface, they are good to work with the rest of the application. So what do I mean by when I say the rest of the application? Let's expand this graph a little bit. So in the application, if you have a sign up process or a login process, this sign up and login process might be dependent on the user interface. And if all these users comply with the user interface, they can automatically start working with the sign up or the login process. So they get the sign up and login functionality as long as they're complying with the user interface. So this theoretical overview is all good, but how does it work in code? Let's look at that. Let's move to Visual Studio Code. So we are inside Visual Studio Code and I have index.ts file opened up. So if I show you around, this is how my setup looks like. I have index.ts, which is compiling to index.js. I'm writing all my code inside index.ts file. So let's start writing our first interface. In TypeScript, you use the interface keyword in order to declare an interface. I'm going to declare an interface called user, and this is how you declare a user interface. Now this user interface is going to have some properties. Think of an interface as a representation of your object. How will your final object look like is defined in an interface. So interface is a contract. If I have three properties inside my interface, those three properties would mandatorily have to exist in my class or in my object. So let's declare few properties inside this interface and let's see how this works. So I'm going to go ahead and declare these three properties. The first property is going to be the username, and this is going to be a type of a string. Then we might have an email. This is going to be a type of a string as well. And finally, I want to have a method inside this particular object, and I want to call this method as login method. This method just logs in the user, so it's a void. It returns nothing in the end. Now, any class that implements this particular interface will have to have all these three properties. Otherwise, TypeScript will throw an error. So you are creating a binding contract for any other kind of user, that whenever you create a new user, for example, an admin user, or you create a guest user or a customer, you have to implement this user interface. And the moment you implement this user interface, your class will need to have all these three properties inside it. So let's try creating an admin class, which will implement the user interface and would have all these three properties. So here I'm going to declare a new admin class. Let's declare a new class. Let's call it admin. And this class is going to implement the user interface. So class admin implements the user interface. Now inside my admin class, I mandatorily need to have all these three properties because it implements the user interface. So while instantiating the class, all these three properties must exist inside admin. So in order to instantiate all these three properties inside my admin class, The moment the admin class is instantiated and a new object is created, I'm going to add a constructor to the admin class. In the constructor, I'm going to make sure that username and email are passed as parameters so that whenever a new user is created using the admin class, these two properties are created. So let's go ahead and add these properties. So I'm going to use the public access modifier and then the username along with this. This is going to be a type of a string. Then I'm also going to go ahead and add email, and this is going to be a type of a string as well. I'll also add the public access modifier along with email also. Now, whenever you're implementing an interface, it does not mean that you just can have the properties of the interface. You can have additional properties in the class as well. So for example, the admin class can have some additional properties which are just unique for the admin class. It's not mandatory to just have the properties of the interface itself. So I can go ahead and add a property which is unique for the admin class. Let's see this in action. I can have another property over here, which is public admin level. So there can be different levels of admin, and this can be a type of a number. So there can be different levels of admin starting from 0, 1, 2, 3, and we can add those numbers to this particular property. Now we need to implement the login method inside the admin class to get rid of this error, because right now if I show you, TypeScript is saying that admin needs to implement login in order to comply with the user interface properly. So you can see TypeScript is creating this binding contract whenever a new user class is declared. It can be an admin class, can be a customer class. So whenever a developer declares these kind of classes, TypeScript will make sure that all the functionality, all the properties of the user interface are implemented in that particular user class. So let's go ahead and create this login method. I'm going to declare this method, that is login, and this method is going to be void, as it says, or the signature says inside the interface as well. Now, just by adding this method, even an empty method, TypeScript doesn't complain now. It understands that a login method has been implemented. So I'm going to use a simple console.log over here and return a message from within this particular method. Let's say admin is now logged in. Now, just the way we have created the admin class, we can also create a customer class, which will also implement the user interface. This customer class can have its own methods as well as properties, which are different from admin, but the only condition is that it must adhere to the user interface contract. So let's go ahead and try creating such a customer class. I'm going to declare a new class over here. Let's call this class as customer. Let me correct the spellings of customer, and this should implement the user interface once again. Now I'm going to go ahead and add a constructor to this particular customer class so that I'm instantiating these two properties at least. So let's just go ahead and copy these two properties and instantiate these two properties within our constructor. Now the customer class has a constructor where we are instantiating the username as well as the email. What we are left with is just the implementation of the login method. So I'm going to copy this login method as well, and I'm going to implement this login method inside the customer class. Once this login method is implemented, you will see that TypeScript stops complaining. TypeScript now understands that you have implemented the login method correctly inside the customer class, and the customer class now adheres or implements all these three properties of the user interface. Now we have looked at one of the aspects of interface where the class that implements the interface is adhering to the interface. So interface is creating this binding contract. But there's another aspect of the interfaces that we spoke about. Let me show you the screen over here. We said that once a class adheres to an interface, then this interface lets that class seamlessly integrate or work with the rest of the application. Now let's see how that works in reality. Going back to Visual Studio Code, and here let me give you an example of another class that might exist inside our application. Let's say our application also has another class, and this is the auth class. This auth class might have all the methods that are responsible for authenticating the user inside the application. And let's assume this auth class has another method called login, which is responsible for logging in the user or creating a session for the user. So let's declare this kind of a method inside this class. Just for the sake of convenience, I'm going to declare a public and a static method. This method is the login method. Now let's say that as a parameter, this method requires a user which is of the type interface user. So what this means is that this method can be used with any user inside the application as long as the user adheres to the user interface. Now you see how an interface is acting like an interface between two components of an application. So this particular method would log in any user which is compliant with the user interface contract. Let's see how this works. So what this particular method is going to do is going to pick up the user that we got as an argument and then just invoke the login method on the user itself. Now, TypeScript already knows that every user is going to have a login method. It might be different in case of a customer, it might be different implementation in case of admin, but they will definitely have the login method because each of these, that is admin, customer, they are adhering to the user interface. They will certainly have the login method. So this is a simple method where it just grabs the user and triggers or invokes the login method on the user object. Now using this, we can create different types of users and we can see this in action, how a user which adheres to the interface, user interface, can interact with the auth class, which also adheres to the user interface, specifically the login method of the auth class. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new user. Let's create a new admin user first. And this is going to be a type of admin, which is this particular class that we have declared right here. So I'm going to create a new admin user. So I'll use the new keyword here and create a new admin user. As the username, let's say the username is Mark. And for the email, which is this second property right here, let's pass the email of Mark. So mark@email.com. And since Mark is an admin, let's say he's the topmost admin. So I say the level of Mark is 1. Similarly, I'm going to go ahead and create a customer user as well. So let's create a customer. This is going to be of the type customer, which is the class that we created. And I'm going to create a new customer. So this customer class requires 2 arguments when creating a new object. So the first name is going to be John and the email is going to be john@email.com. Now you see, we have these 2 users created and we can simply go ahead and use the auth method, the login method on the auth class in order to log in both of these users. So let's go ahead and log in the admin user. I'm going to use the auth class and then the login method on the auth class. And you will see while invoking this method, I can simply pass the admin user and this will log in the admin user. We can do the same for the customer user as well. So we use the login method on the auth class and instead of passing admin as an argument, this time I'm going to pass the newly created customer user. Now you will see customer is a different class altogether. Admin is a different class altogether, but auth is able to work both with admin as well as with customer just because admin and customer adhere or implement the same interface. Now, in order to see these methods in action, let's just go ahead and invoke the index.js file that is being created using index.typescript file. Before I do that, I have just noticed that inside the customer class, I still have this admin over here. So let's change this to customer so that we're able to identify the difference between these 2 console log statements. Now let me open my terminal and over here, I'm going to use node.js in order to invoke index.js. You will see admin is now logged in and customer is now logged in, which is printed because of these 2 lines. This is how interfaces act as an interface between multiple components of your application. On a side note, I do have a course on TypeScript and this course covers all beginner as well as advanced level topics in TypeScript. So starting from the beginner level concepts like arrays, tuples, objects, primitive types, I take you to advanced level concepts like declaration files, namespaces, modules, generics, decorators, and so on. This course has more than 240 videos with more than 22 hours of content. I also show you how you can use TypeScript along with Node as well as with React. The price is pretty nominal and you can check out the course as the link to the course has been given in the description below. That's all for this video. I'll see you soon guys. Thanks for watching.